Hello everyone. Tonight we begin a slow, dusty, high-altitude walk through time up into the Andes, into the heart of the Inca Empire, and straight into a day that, well, let's just say, you probably wouldn't last through breakfast. Before you settle in, take 2 seconds to like and subscribe. It helps more people find this and unwind just like you're about to. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, lower the lights, let the hum of the world fade behind you, and tonight it's just you in this story. You wake up shivering. The ground beneath you is made of packed earth, and your pillow is a bundle of reeds that gave up being soft somewhere around 1436. A thin alpaca wool blanket has slid halfway down your legs in the night, and it might as well be made of whispers for all the warmth it offers. Your lungs ache a little, not from sickness, but from elevation. You're nearly 12,000 feet above sea level in a small Inca village, tucked between the ridges of a jagged Andean valley, and the air is thinner than your chances of a leisurely morning. Beside you, a soft snort. You glance over, and of course, there's Skrapi, the goat. He's curled up next to a clay pot of dried maize, which he's probably been nibbling in his sleep. He opens one eye to acknowledge your suffering, then goes right back to napping. Classic. Outside, someone's blowing into a conch shell trumpet. Sounds like an elephant trying to yawn underwater. That's your cue. Everyone in the Alu, your kin-based community, is expected to be up before the sun, working before their second yawn. You scramble to pull on your tunic, its woven fibers, scratchier than burlap dipped in cactus. In the Inca world, textiles are a big deal. The more complex the pattern, the higher your status. Yours says, "Congratulations, you're nobody important." You step outside, and the cold hits like a slap. The mountains are silent, dramatic, and absolutely stunning. Not that you get to enjoy the view. Someone tosses you a rough corn cake and mumbles about today's labor assignment. Your stomach growls at the sight of breakfast, which tastes like it was cooked 3 weeks ago and then aged under a sleeping llama. It's dry, it's crumbly. You eat it anyway. Skrapi follows you outside, blinking slowly at the sunrise like it personally offended him. Then he wanders off toward a basket of coca leaves someone left unattended. You pretend not to notice. The last time someone scolded him, he head-butted their storage gourd into next Tuesday. The Alu's leader, or Curaka, calls the morning meeting. You stand among your neighbors, eyes darting between the sky and your own 2 aching feet. The Curaka announces that you've been assigned to farm terraces today, meaning you'll spend the next several hours climbing and descending stone steps with baskets full of potatoes, all while pretending not to die from exertion. But that's not all. You're also expected to assist in the state-sponsored llama caravan that's stopping through your village. "Because you're young and spry," the Curaka says, eyeing your skinny arms like they might be good at lifting rocks. Skrapi bleats once, loud, judgmental, and probably accurate. You trudge toward the terraces, boots, well, more like foot wraps, kicking up the frost as you go. All around you, neighbors are already working. A woman with braids down to her waist stacks stones into neat, retaining walls. A boy not much older than you is halfway up a slope with a basket balanced on his back like a boulder on a twig. Everyone moves with the quiet rhythm of routine. This is life. You, however, are winded before you reach the first terrace. Welcome to high-altitude agriculture. The Incas mastered farming in the Andes through incredible engineering, stone terraces, that not only prevented soil erosion but cleverly stored water and regulated temperature. Historians widely agree that their methods were environmentally sustainable and astonishingly efficient. But none of those academic accolades are helping your lungs as you haul a basket of potatoes up steps, designed by a sadist. By mid-morning, your arms feel like boiled quinoa. Your tunic is soaked with sweat, which immediately cools in the wind, turning your body into a confused, freezer-burned vegetable. Skrapi reappears, casually hopping along a ledge above you, chewing something that was probably sacred to someone. You call to him, mostly for moral support. He ignores you, then disappears again like a tiny, shaggy deity. Then comes the Chasqui, a royal messenger. He sprints down the road, blowing into a shell trumpet, and hands the Curaka a knotted string. Aquipu. You crane your neck to see the multicolored cords dangling, each knot an encoded message. The Curaka squints and mumbles, and you think you hear the words, "Labor tax increase." You sigh. You've been alive in this world for 5 hours, and already you owe the Empire more than your last 3 reincarnations combined. The day stretches on, marked by sun and sweat, and the occasional warning cry of llama incoming. You dodge spit and hooves as a caravan passes, bell-adorned animals trotting down the trail like they own the place. One of them seems to wink at you. Or maybe it's just dust in your eyes. As the sun begins to climb overhead, your thoughts drift. To lunch, such as it is, a bowl of mushy maize and beans, flavored with desperation and a sprinkle of ashes. Skrapi reappears like he never left, flopping beside you in the shade of a storage hut, clearly exhausted from his personal adventures. You envy him. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes the full realization that the air here is less breathable suggestion and more ongoing negotiation. Every inhale feels like a deal struck with the mountain gods, one step away from collapse, one potato, shy of altitude sickness. Your fingers are numb, your calves are trembling, and you've already tripped twice on stones someone swears were placed for drainage. You suspect they were placed out of spite after dropping off your latest load of spuds, some of which Skrapi may have nibbled while pretending to be asleep. You're sent to the storage huts near the edge of the village. These structures, known as kolkas, are carefully placed to catch the right mix of wind and shade. They're part of the Inca state's grand logistics system, cool, dry, rat-proof granaries that store everything from corn to dried fish to ceremonial textiles. They're a wonder of ancient infrastructure. You, however, are just trying not to collapse in front of a pile of dried alpaca jerky. You're tasked with helping carry inventory to the village Yanakuna, a state servant who oversees redistribution. You fumble your way through a verbal inventory. The man raises a brow as you miscount a batch of freeze-dried potatoes. "That's chunyo, not okay," he mutters. You nod like you understand. You don't. Historians still argue whether the Incas' classification system for food was more complex than ours or just better suited to their incredibly specific environment. Either way, it's above your pay grade. Skrapi, meanwhile, is chewing a corner of the thatched roof. The Curaka waves you back over. A new task, carrying water from the communal canal. You follow a stone-lined path to an irrigation channel, a marvel of ancient engineering, really carved into the mountain and snaking for miles. The water is clear, icy, and moving with the relentless purpose of something created under imperial orders. You dip a clay vessel into the stream, only for it to wobble dangerously in your hands. Water sloshes, you're soaked, your toes are soaked. Your dignity is soaked. By the time you return, you're shaking slightly, mostly from cold, partly from fear of dropping anything else. The Curaka narrows his eyes. Careful, he says. Water is sacred. Waste it, and the huacas will notice.
Ah, yes, the huacas, the spirits of sacred places, mountains, and stones. The Incas believed the landscape itself was alive with divine energy. A river wasn't just a river, it was a being with memory, expectation, and a temper. You look back
At the irrigation channel and whisper a quick apology. Skrapi somehow is standing in the middle of it like a tiny woolly statue, unmoved by the possibility of divine consequences. The afternoon shifts into a grey-bronze light, the kind that says, "Don't bother trying to guess the time anymore." You're sent with a group of villagers to the edge of the Tambo, a kind of roadside rest stop for travellers and runners on official business. You're told to sweep the courtyard, refill baskets of food, and stack firewood for a visiting tax collector. That's when you meet her, the travelling chaksa, or messenger runner. She's maybe 17, wears a tunic so finely woven it practically
sparkles and has calf muscles that look like they could cut through tree bark.
She nods at you politely. You try to nod back and instead drop your broom. Skrapi chooses this moment to bleat so loudly it echoes off the hills. You're still blushing when the tax collector arrives. He's wearing an enormous feathered headdress and robes dyed with cochineal red, a pigment so valuable that some regions used it in tribute instead of gold. He steps off his litter and immediately sneezes from the highland dust. "Who's responsible for the llama with the attitude?" he asks. Everyone looks at Skrapi. "Not mine," you say automatically. "You feed it," the Karaka says flatly. "Feeding isn't owning," you mutter. The tax collector inspects the kolka stocks. He frowns. "We're short on feathers this cycle." "Birds molted late," your Karaka says quickly. "They always do," the tax collector mutters, jotting something into a bark paper scroll with a charcoal stylus. You try not to draw attention to yourself.
You fail. He turns toward you. "You, runner." You blink. "What?" He gestures toward the next village hours away and hands you a sealed pouch. "Deliver this by nightfall. You are now a Chasqui, whether you like it or not." Skrapi immediately
begins trotting in the direction of the trail, as if he's been expecting this the whole time. You follow him, the pouch bouncing against your side, your legs moving faster than your sense of caution. The trail is narrow and steep, winding around, cliff faces that drop hundreds of feet into river gorges. You keep one hand on the wall, the other clenched around the strap of the message pouch. You pass a pair of stone pillars, Inca Apachitas, sacred markers where travelers leave stones or coca leaves to ask for protection. You toss a pebble onto the pile and whisper something about not dying. Skrapi jumps on the pile, knocks over your pebble and then keeps walking. He's a menace. You love him. By the time you reach the outpost, your lungs are screaming, your knees feel like overcooked maize, and your tunic has soaked through with sweat. The man at the gate takes the pouch with a nod. "Good time," he says. You're too winded to respond. Skrapi pees on the gatepost. Perfect ending. The outpost is quiet now, your legs still shaking from the descent. The Andean dusk falls fast. One moment it's gold light across the peaks. The next, it's a wall of blue shadow creeping up from the valley. You sit on a stone bench near the entryway, catching your breath, trying to stretch your calves without tipping over. Skrapi is already curled up under a nearby shelf, chewing something you're pretty sure used to be ceremonial. You don't ask. One of the guards at the outpost watches him squinting. "That your llama?" he asks, tilting his head as if trying to solve a puzzle from a distance. You blink at him. "He's a goat." "Huh," the guard says, still unconvinced. Looks like a small angry sheep to me. This isn't the first time. Last week someone insisted Skrapi was a short-eared dog. The week before, an old woman tried to trade you a sack of beans for the polite little alpaca. You glance at Skrapi, who belches softly in his sleep. You mutter, "You're a goat, right?" Skrapi doesn't respond. Typical. But somewhere in your brain, maybe the part short on oxygen and long on exhaustion, you wonder if he's ever answered, or if he's ever really needed to. You don't even remember when you met him. He's just always been there, like cold mornings and itchy tunics, like breathlessness and soot. With the message delivered, you're offered a place to sleep in the outpost storeroom. It smells like damp grain and unwashed sandals, but after today, it might as well be a palace. You curl up on a folded reed, Matt, Skrapi choosing, as usual, the most comfortable spot, a wool pile clearly meant for officials. A guard pokes his head in and eyes the goat non-goat. You sure that's not just a hairy cushion with legs? You sigh. Sure. The guard nods and shuts the door. The next morning comes with the sound of reed flutes and someone stomping outside. A new Kuraka has arrived from the highlands, and he's calling for Mitta labourers to repair the next section of road. You've barely rubbed the sleep from your eyes before a thick-fingered man tosses you a stone hammer and gestures toward the hillside. "Congratulations," he says. "You're now a road mason." The Inca road system, known as the Kapak Nyan, stretches over 24,000 miles through mountains, deserts, and jungles. Built entirely without the wheel, draft animals, other than llamas, or iron tools, it remains one of the most impressive logistical feats of the pre-modern world. Scholars still debate how they maintain such a vast network with such precision, especially when even your own bedroom floor is barely flat. Today, you're meant to reinforce a section damaged by a recent landslide. You're given no real instruction, just a sense that if the rocks wobble, you're doing it wrong. You begin lifting and stacking stones, your arms wobbling after the second load. The altitude's not helping. Neither is the fact that
Skrapi has wandered up the slope and is now standing squarely on your tool pile, chewing your rope like it owes him money. Is that your pig?
someone asks from behind you. "He's a goat," you mumble. "Oh, he just smelled more buttery than most goats." You stare at Skrapi. He stares back, unbothered. As you dig through soil and drag flat stones into place, you hear other workers humming a low rhythmic tune. It's not a song exactly, more like a work chant, simple and steady, designed to keep everyone moving in time. It helps. You fall into the rhythm, lifting, placing, pounding. Skrapi hums too in his own way, a kind of deep-throated grumble. That might be contentment, might be protest, might be both. During your mid-morning break, you sit on the edge of a retaining wall, chewing on a handful of roasted corn kernels and coca leaves. A fellow worker leans next to you and says, "You know, they say these roads are sacred, laid down by the gods themselves." You nod, unsure whether he's serious. They say if you walk far enough on them, you meet someone who's never been
Born, and someone who never died. You glance at Skrapi, who is currently standing perfectly still, eyes closed, in a sunbeam.
He looks like a statue left behind by a particularly eccentric god. You whisper, "You're just a goat, right?" No response. The road repair continues until midday, when a clay horn signals a break. You're escorted to a small shrine built into the hillside, an old huasha thought to house the spirit of a mountain. It's a simple affair, stones arranged in a ring, an offering bowl at its center, half filled with crushed maize and flowers. Everyone leaves a token, you drop a pebble. Skrapi deposits something he probably shouldn't have eaten. The priest overseeing the shrine doesn't notice. Or pretends not to. You ever wonder, a voice says behind you, if the mountains...
Actually watching? You turn. It's the Chuksa, the runner from yesterday, wiping sweat from her brow and nodding toward the peak above.
My grandmother said they have eyes, she adds. They ever blink? You ask, trying to sound casual. Only if you're disrespectful. You and Skrapi both very quickly bow to the shrine. The rest of the afternoon is spent rerouting part of the trail to avoid a newly formed crevice. This involves hauling large stones up a slope, across a beam, and into place while 3 older workers shout conflicting advice from different angles. Skrapi, despite being a goat, and therefore allegedly sure-footed, nearly falls into the crevice while trying to chase a bird. You scream. He doesn't. He lands, recovers, and acts like it was all intentional. You end the day with blistered palms, a sunburn across your nose, and one very mangled piece of rope. A final check-in with the labor coordinator confirms you're not being reassigned tomorrow, which is both a relief and mildly insulting. Apparently your rock stacking lacked consistency. Skrapi licks your face as you lie down under a pile of blankets. You push him off. He climbs back on, you fall asleep wondering what he really is, and why he never leaves, and whether, when you finally drop from exhaustion, he'll just keep walking. Maybe he already has. You wake up with your face pressed against a smooth stone floor and the faint smell of ash in your nose. For a few glorious seconds, you don't know where you are. Then the sun hits your eyelids, the blisters on your hands throb awake, and Skrapi steps casually over your torso on his way to investigate someone else's breakfast. Right, still in the Inca Empire, still not thriving. Today the Karaka assigns you to terrace farming again, but not in the comfort of your own village this time. No, you're being lent to a neighboring Ailu for communal work, because apparently, in Inca society, labor is like a shared pie, and you, friend, are always the last slice handed out. The journey begins at sunrise. The trail winds higher, into the mountains, skirting narrow ridges and stone walls built with terrifying confidence. You pass carefully engineered agricultural terraces that seem to defy gravity, stone-faced steps built into sheer slopes filled with layers of gravel, sand and topsoil. They keep the water in, the erosion out, and the workers on their toes. You're paired with a small crew of locals who eye you like a questionable squash. One of them gestures toward your trailing companion and asks, "Is that a dog?" You blink. He's a goat. The man frowns, squints, then shrugs. Looks like a shaggy spirit. Then he spits into his hand and pats Skrapi on the head for luck. You make a mental note. Today is the day you stop trying to explain Skrapi. Your task is simple. Plant. But the planting doesn't involve tossing seeds into dirt with a casual flick.
No, this is sacred agriculture practiced with precision.
You're handed a tackler, a kind of foot plow, and shown how to jam it into the earth with your foot while leaning your full weight forward and chanting a rhythm to keep in sync with the others. Think slow farming, tai chi, but with fewer silk, robes and more altitude sickness. The lead farmer, a woman with weathered hands and arms like braided cables, demonstrates once, then nods at you. You try. The takala hits a rock, rebounds, and throws you sideways into a pile of compost that may have once been honorable maize. Skrapi trots over and immediately lays down in the compost, sighing like it's a spa treatment. You groan. The farmer laughs. After a few tries, you manage to plant a few rows of ochre, a kind of starchy root that looks like a tuber and tastes like despair, unless roasted over an open flame with generous seasoning. The work is rhythmic, oddly meditative, and backbreaking. You find yourself settling into the tempo, your arms burning, your legs trembling, your feet slowly accepting their fate. Around midday, a break is called. Everyone sits in the shade of a low stone wall, passing around roasted guinea pig wrapped in banana leaves. You politely decline. Skrapi does not. He is fed 5 times by 5 different people who all think he's a very brave little deer. You spend the break gazing at the valley below. It's beautiful in that quiet, breathtaking way that almost makes you forget you're technically indentured. You can see llamas weaving along stone roads like living threads, and far in the distance, the glint of a gold-domed temple dedicated to Inti, the sun god. The Inca elite believed Inti watched over everything, and his favor was needed for crop to thrive. Some historians argue that worshipping Inti wasn't just religious, it was politically strategic, uniting dozens of tribes under a singular divine hierarchy. You shade your eyes against the sunlight and wonder if Inti notices you. Planting someone else is okay, Skrapi sneezes. Probably not. Afternoon comes with a fresh breeze and a change of tasks. You're told to help maintain the amunas, stone irrigation channels that snake across the terraces like carefully organized veins. These channels were used to collect, store, and redirect mountain runoff during the dry season, ensuring every drop of water counted. It's genius and slippery. You're handed a stone scraper and told to clean moss from the inner walls. Halfway through your first channel, your foot slips and you're halfway submerged in ankle-deep glacial runoff. You shriek. Skrapi, now standing on the wall, watches impassively as you flail for dignity. Once cleaned and clear, the channels are opened by removing carved plugs. The water surges in with a satisfying rush, trickling down into the terrace basins. You watch it flood, the soil evenly like a blessing spread out through stone and earth. One of the elders murmurs a quick prayer of thanks, touching the water with 2 fingers and then his forehead. He turns to you and says, "Everything has spirit, even the mud." You nod solemnly. Then you slip in it again. Skrapi bleats once, which you interpret as applause. Evening arrives in a soft, pink haze. You return to the village guest house, your knees locking and unlocking like they're being operated by an indecisive puppeteer. Dinner is a thick stew of quinoa and crushed beans, flavored with herbs you can't name. It's hearty, hot, and clings to your insides like friendship. You inhale it. Skrapi, by this point, has made himself a bed out of someone's spare tunic. He is surrounded by small children who are braiding flowers into his tail and debating whether he is in fact a magic spirit animal. One child is convinced he was sent by Pachamama, the earth goddess. Another says he's just a dusty sheep with ideas. You don't weigh in. You lie down on your woven mat, arms like lead, feet blistered, chest tight from thin air and thin hope. The stars begin to appear outside, first one, then another, then entire constellations, brighter and closer than anywhere you've ever been. Skrapi curls up next to you, letting out a long, satisfied exhale. You mirror him. Neither of you speaks, but for a moment it feels like everything, including you, belongs exactly where it is. You wake to the distant rhythm of a pan flute and a sharp jab in your ribs, courtesy of Skrapi's bony little hooves. He's stepping over you like he's late for an appointment, which, come to think of it, is possible. You're starting to suspect he keeps his own schedule, one unrelated to anything you understand. You rub your eyes and sit up slowly, body stiff from yesterday's farming marathon. Your tunic smells like compost, sweat, and hope. Hope that maybe today you won't be volunteered for another round of backbreaking imperial goodwill. That hope dies instantly when someone kicks open the guest house door and announces, "Lama, duty!" Of course, you're herded out into the morning chill with a dozen other unlucky souls, all of you blinking at the herd of llamas standing in a corral, chewing cud and staring at you like you're the help, which you are. You're handed a rope halter and assigned a particularly judgmental-looking llama named Illimani. He stares at you, then spits on your knee. Off to a good start, Skrapi, trotting behind you with his usual smugness, is not assigned to the caravan. He is, as always, self-appointed. One of the caravan leaders eyes him. "You bring your sheep?" He's a goat, you mumble. "Right. Well, hope your whatever it is can keep up." "You don't bother explaining, not after the last guy," said Skrapi looked like a demon disguised as a dog. "Your assignment is to help guide the llamas from the village to a midway trading post, about 10 miles along the mountainside. The trail is narrow, winding, and spectacularly unfit for clumsy humans. Llamas, of course, handle it with smug elegance, stepping like runway models on a jagged stone catwalk. You, meanwhile, are sweating within 5 minutes. Caravan winds its way through breathtaking terrain, sweeping valleys painted with rows of green terraces, mist rising like steam from invisible kettles, and towering peaks in the distance that seem to poke holes in the sky. But you can't enjoy the view because Illimani keeps trying to veer off the trail to snack on cacti. And every time you tug his lead, he responds by turning his head and humming ominously. Skrapi follows, of course, not on the path, but alongside it, prancing along a completely illogical ridge. At one point, he disappears entirely, only to reappear 2 hills later with a mouthful of someone's forgotten corn cakes. You reach the halfway point around midday. A small flat clearing with stone shelters, clay jugs of chicha, and a few brightly dressed traders already setting up baskets of textiles, dried peppers, and guinea pig skewers. A small crowd gathers as the llamas are unloaded, goods sorted, and officials begin inspecting the knots and bundles. You're told to help unload, which sounds simple until you realize that each llama has been packed like a holiday piñata. Dozens of bundles tied with hand-woven cords and color-coded knots. You undo one the wrong way, and suddenly the entire bundle explodes into a waterfall of chili peppers. A child claps, you bow. Skrapi eats 2 peppers before anyone stops him. He does not regret it. Inca trade was based less on coin and more on state redistribution and barter, a highly organized system where goods were exchanged between ecological zones. Coastal goods, fish, salt, shells, were brought inland, while highland crops, metals, and textiles moved downward. Historians still marvel at how the empire functioned without a currency, but with remarkable efficiency. You, however, are not marveling. You're busy repacking bundles while a llama chews your sleeve. After everything's sorted, you're given a cup of chicha, a fermented corn drink that tastes like sour bread soaked in foot sweat. You sip politely. It burns a little. You blink tears. "Good, right?" the trader says proudly. "It's memorable." Beside you, Skrapi headbutts a gourd off a low wall. A small crowd cheers. And then things take a turn. One of the caravan leaders starts shouting. 2 llamas are missing. Panic spreads. Ropes are checked. Tracks are examined. "Probably wandered," someone says. "Or bandits," someone else whispers. You freeze. Bandits? Yes. Inca highway bandits were a real thing. though rarely successful due to state patrols. Still, the threat lingered, especially in remote areas or during supply shortages. Some historians argue these bandits were actually starving peasants trying to escape the rigid control of the empire's labor taxes. Others say they were just opportunistic troublemakers with bad timing and good aim. The group decides to investigate. You're handed a sling, a loop of woven cord used for flinging rocks, and pointed toward the ridge where the tracks vanish. You've never used one before. You spin it experimentally and immediately hit yourself in the shin. Skrapi bleats once in what you interpret as judgment. The search begins. You're sent with 3 others up a steep goat trail that barely qualifies as a path. The air is thinner up here, and each step feels like dragging your own skeleton uphill. You spot tufts of llama wool on thorny bushes, footprints in soft mud, and at one point, a suspicious pile that Skrapi immediately investigates. You turn away. He's got no boundaries. Eventually you crest a hill, and there they are. The missing llamas, grazing happily in a sunlit patch of grass next to a startled family of farmers. Turns out they just wandered into the wrong village. You're relieved. Everyone is. Skrapi jumps onto a low wall and strikes a triumphant pose like he found them himself. The locals immediately try to feed him roasted potatoes and ask what kind of royal dog he is. You escort the llamas back, cheeks sunburned, feet swollen, and sling unused. One of the guards pats you on the back and says, "Good herding. You've got a future." You laugh. Then you realize he might be serious. Back at the trading post, the sun begins to set behind the jagged peaks, turning the sky molten. You sit beside a small fire, roasting ears of maize on sticks. Skrapi curls beside you, content and purring. Not that goats purr, but if they did, that's what it would sound like. A trader sits nearby and gestures toward the horizon. They say if you lead llamas at sunset, the gods will whisper your name. You raise a brow. Do they whisper the names of goats too? He squints at Skrapi. That's a goat? You just sigh and eat your corn. You sleep beneath the stars that night, wrapped in a borrowed tunic and a half-roasted corn husk. The fire dwindles to glowing embers, and Skrapi snores beside you with all the dignity of a collapsed pile of laundry. Somewhere in the distance, a pututu horn sounds, a low, haunting call that echoes across the valley. Morning isn't far. You're awakened at dawn not by the sound of birds or chanting, but by a child poking you with a stick. He's alive, the kid announces proudly. You open one eye. Barely. The caravan is already in motion. Today's task? Return to the village, only this time you're carrying back tribute from the trading post. Textiles, dried peppers, a small bag of obsidian flakes, and a gourd of fermented chicha sealed with beeswax that smells a little too alive. As you tie bundles onto the llamas, you overhear the word Inti Raymi. A festival, you're excited, briefly. Then you realize festivals mean preparation, and preparation means labor. You're right. As soon as you arrive back at the village, you're handed a broom made from bundled reeds and told to sweep the ceremonial plaza. A job that sounds peaceful until you're doing it alongside 20 other people, all under the watchful eye of the village priest who critiques the sweep pattern like it's imperial calligraphy. Skrapi watches from atop a half-finished stone altar. He yawns, tips over a bowl of flower petals, then pretends it didn't happen. Whose llama is that? Someone asks. You don't answer. As the morning progresses, the village transforms. Flags of woven cotton are hung from wooden poles. Sacred. Stones are polished until they shine like dew. A ceremonial fire pit is cleaned out and stacked with new kindling. You're tasked with hauling dye pots, to the weaving house, each filled with pungent, viscous liquids. The red dye is made from cochineal beetles, the blue, fermented indigo. You drop one of the lids and get splashed in what you hope is just plant-based color. Your hands will be purple until next Thursday. Inside the weaving house, women sit cross-legged with backstrap looms, fingers flying as they weave intricate geometric patterns into cloth. These aren't just decorative. In Inca society, textiles were a form of communication, indicators of social class, geographic origin, and even political allegiance. Some tunics were so symbolic, they were considered more valuable than gold. One of the weavers glances at you and frowns. "That goat shouldn't be in here." You turn. Skrapi is sitting on a pile of uncarded wool, chewing methodically, like he's sampling a new appetizer. "I'm sorry," you begin, but she waves you.
Off. No, I meant that's not a goat.
"That's a cloud with opinions." You blink. Skrapi burps. After you're kicked out of the weaving house, gently, with a basket of dyed yarn thrown in your direction, you're reassigned to help prepare ceremonial food. This is slightly better. You help grind maize on a large flat stone called a batan, turning kernels into a fine meal with a heavy handstone. It's repetitive, calming, and good for spacing out. You spend a while watching the cook shape the dough into tiny discs and toss them onto a clay griddle over coals. He hums as he works, stopping occasionally to swat Skrapi away from the drying
Rax, the goat, eventually climbs onto the roof and stares down judgmentally at everyone like a woolly gargoyle. Someone asks again, "Is that your llama?" "Still a goat," you mumble. That afternoon, the festival begins.
The Inti Raymi, or Festival of the Sun, was the Inca Empire's most important religious event, held annually near the winter solstice to honor Inti, the sun god. Historical accounts describe days of music, dancing, feasting, and sacrifices, though historians still debate whether all sacrifices were symbolic or occasionally involved llamas, or worse. You're given ceremonial garments, a new tunic, still itchy, a woven belt, and a pair of sandals that are somehow less comfortable than your bare feet. Everyone gathers in the plaza as the village priest lights the central fire, its smoke rising in delicate spirals. Offerings of maize, fruit, and chicha are placed at the foot of the fire. A choir of singers begins to chant. The melody rises and falls like wind through stone corridors. You stand among the villagers, swaying slightly, feeling, just for a moment, like a thread in something ancient and immense. Skrapi walks straight into the center of the ceremony, plops down in front of the fire, and sneezes directly on a basket
of sacred coca leaves. The priest pauses. Everyone stares. You hold your breath. The priest blinks. This animal is clearly an avatar of something. He raises his arms and declares, "Let it remain." Skrapi licks his own shoulder and knocks
over a goblet of ceremonial beer. The festival continues. You're swept up in the celebration, literally. You're grabbed by the arm and dragged into a line of dancers performing a traditional step that involves bouncing, shuffling, and the occasional shout to the sky. You're clumsy at first, but the rhythm grows familiar. You smile, you laugh, you don't fall over. And then you spot Skrapi wearing someone's feathered hat and chewing the hem of your tunic. As the sun sets and the fire blazes bright, the dancers circle the flame, casting long shadows on the ground. The priest speaks a final blessing in Quechua, praising the sun, the earth, the ancestors, and the strange spirit animal that wandered into their lives. You lie on the grass after, dizzy from motion and corn beer, and stare up at the sky. stars flicker to life, sharp and cold and countless. You're sore, tired, sunburned, stained purple, and, weirdly, content. Skrapi settles beside you. Still wearing the hat, you pat his side. Thanks for not being a llama. He responds by stealing your leftover maize cake. You awaken the next morning with the vague feeling that you've been trampled by ceremonial dancers. Everything aches, from your sunburned nose to the tips of your toes, which, for the record, still sting from yesterday's sandals. Skrapi is lying across your chest like a furry boulder, wearing his stolen feathered hat as though it's a birthright. You push him off with a grunt. He yawns, stretches, and promptly walks into someone's grain bin. Today, you're reassigned. No terraces, no festivals. You're being sent to the Quipucamayok, the keeper of the quipus, the knotted string records used to track everything from census data to tribute to military movement. Your job is to assist with the monthly review of resource allocation. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds safe. Sedentary. Indoor. You're wrong. You arrive at a small building on the edge of the village, where dozens of strings hang from ceiling beams like spiderwebs on laundry day. Each cord is dyed a different color, knotted in strange configurations that look meaningless to you but apparently say things like 4 alpacas short in Region 3 or 6,000 ears of maize delivered by drunk runners. The Quipucamayok, a stern woman in her 60s, eyes you the same way someone might eye a dropped gourd. "You're here to help?" she asks. You nod eagerly. She hands you a cord. "Start by sorting these by decimal place." You stare at her, then at the Quipu, then back at her. "Sorry, by what?" "Base 10. It's the system we use. Tens, hundreds, thousands," she says, already walking away. "Right." You hold the string up. There are knots everywhere. Tight, loose, spaced, close together, spaced far apart. You begin sorting, then resorting, then possibly undoing centuries of order. Skrapi appears, sits directly on a pile of color-coded cords, and begins licking one. You shoo him off, muttering, "Don't you dare eat someone's tax return." As you struggle through the knot arithmetic, the Quipucamayok returns to check your progress. She frowns. "You've reordered these based on cord color, not numerical value." You blink. "Also," she adds, "you've separated these based on llama fur categories instead of delivery zones. To be fair, one of the strings did smell like wool." She sighs and motions for you to start again. Quipus, despite appearing deceptively simple, were incredibly complex data tools. Each knot's size, position, and twist conveyed numbers and meaning. Though modern historians have decoded parts of the system, there's still debate over whether some quipus were also narrative, able to record stories, history, even poetry. You can't tell if you're touching a census or the Iliad of the Andes. Either way, you're definitely making it worse. Eventually you're reassigned again, this time to deliver a finished quipu to a nearby administrator. It must remain dry, the Quipucamayok warns. If the strings swell or mildew, it's unreadable. "No pressure," you say. She does not laugh. You wrap the quipu in waxed cloth, secure it with twine, and tuck it under your arm. Skrapi follows close behind, occasionally trotting ahead like he knows the way. A few villagers wave. One calls out, "That's your deer." You don't even pause. "He's a goat." They nod, uncertain. The path winds through hills and stone markers. You pass a shrine to Pachamama, the earth goddess, decorated with offerings of coca leaves, beads, and a half-eaten tamale. Skrapi tries to add a pebble to the pile. It rolls off. He adds a bigger one. Success. Halfway there, storm clouds begin to gather over the mountain ridges.
A fine mist rolls in, chilling your skin. You pick up the pace. The Quipu must stay dry. Skrapi runs ahead, disappears into the fog. You call for him. No answer. Then suddenly, thunder. Not from the sky, but the ground. A stampede. You barely leap off the trail before a herd of alpacas charges past, kicking up dust and panic.
Skrapi is in the middle of them, riding the wave like a furry raft. You hold the Quipu tighter and scramble down a slope, sliding on loose gravel. The alpacas veer off. Skrapi emerges from the dust with a single feather still tucked in his hat. You glare, he sneezes, you continue the journey, now damp, dusty, and swearing that if anything touches this Quipu, you're tying knots in Skrapi's tail. But miraculously, you arrive intact. The administrator, a man with sharp eyes and an unsettlingly quiet voice, unfolds the cloth, checks the knots, and nods. Acceptable. High praise, apparently. He gestures to a corner where you're allowed to rest. You collapse onto a woven mat. Skrapi curls beside you and begins chewing on your sandal. I'm never going near strings again, you whisper. Later that evening, as you return to the village, you pass a group of runners training near the road. One of them pauses and points at Skrapi. That thing yours? You nod. What breed is it? You open your mouth, pause, then sigh. I don't know anymore. The runner grins. Must be lucky. You haven't dropped dead yet. You don't know if that's a compliment, a prophecy, or just a weird truth. But as you walk the final mile back to your sleeping mat, your back sore, your arms tired, and your mind tied in knots like the ones you sorted all day, you realize something strange. You're starting to feel like you belong here, even if your goat doesn't. Today begins with a knock on your forehead, not metaphorically. An actual knock from a stick, wielded by a man in a heavy tunic who pokes you awake like he's checking for ripeness. You blink, confused, then remember you're scheduled to help, prepare for a royal visit. And apparently you overslept. Skrapi is, of course, already awake. He's standing on top of a storage basket and chewing a ceremonial headband that definitely belonged to someone important. You try to pry it from his teeth. He lets go just in time for you to fall backward into a pile of bean husks, off to a strong start. You're rushed to the village plaza where things are already in motion. Banners hang from rooftops. Fires are being lit in designated clay pits. Food preparation is in full swing. Today, the Sapa Inca's envoy is passing through, and everything must be perfect. Even the stones are being scrubbed. You're handed a broom again. You sweep like your life depends on it. Then someone taps your shoulder and says, "You're too short to be seen from the street. Go inside and help with the feather arrangements." You blink. Feather arrangements? Cut to you, sitting in a corner of a thatched roof storehouse, surrounded by baskets of feathers in every size and color, being instructed by a woman who looks like she hasn't smiled since the last eclipse. "These are mulu," she says, holding up a shimmering pink shell fragment. "For offerings, not for goat toys." You nod solemnly and try not to make eye contact with Skrapi, who's already stolen 3 blue feathers and is trying to make a nest out of them under a bench. You sort feathers by length, sheen, and sanctity. Some are destined for cloaks, some for headdresses, some for offerings. In the Inca world, feathers were a status symbol. The more exotic, the higher your standing. Some were imported from the Amazon hundreds of miles away. Historians debate whether this trade was managed by royal decree or merchant guilds, but one thing is clear. You do not misplace the red feathers. Ever. You misplace the red feathers. Skrapi takes one in his mouth, dashes out the door, and leads you on a wild chase across the plaza, through a line of dancers, under a llama cart, and finally into a maize bin where you both land with a thump and a cloud of grain dust. When you return, the woman just stares at you. "He's not a goat, is he?" You pant. "Some days I'm not even sure I'm a person." She nods, accepts this. Later you're sent to help with food preparation, specifically the presentation of ceremonial dishes to the envoy. The Sapa Inca, the emperor himself, isn't visiting, but his emissaries demand full hospitality. This means steaming, plates of roasted guinea pig, maize cakes with herbs, chili pastes, and lawa, a thick porridge you're tasked with stirring in a giant clay pot. You stir and keep stirring. Someone shouts for more firewood. You fetch it. Someone else calls for extra coca leaves. You fetch those too. Eventually, you're just fetching things. You become an errand blur. At one point, someone mistakes you for a servant. You don't correct them. Skrapi appears midway. Through the chaos, covered in flour, dragging a yam in his teeth, he deposits it proudly at your feet. You sigh and place it in the offering bowl. When the envoy finally arrives, the entire village lines the street. Drums beat, flutes play, dancers in vibrant textiles perform synchronized steps. You stand near. The back, sweating, exhausted, and smelling like chicha, feathers, and regret. The envoy is carried in on a litter, an ornate platform held aloft by 4 men. He wears gold jewelry that glints even in the cloud cover, and a tunic so finely woven it looks like embroidery done by hummingbirds. His expression is one of polite boredom, until he sees Skrapi. Still flour-dusted, wearing a crooked headband, Skrapi steps calmly into the street and stands directly in front of the procession. Everything stops. The envoy leans forward. "What is that?" he asks. You wince. "It's a goat," the envoy says. "Looks like a noble beast, a creature of omens." Someone nearby whispers, "I heard it survived a landslide and bandits." Another chimes in, "It eats sacred maize and is still alive." The envoy nods solemnly. An omen indeed. And just like that, Skrapi is elevated from nuisance to symbol of divine weirdness. You don't know whether to be proud or terrified. After the envoy departs, the mood is light. Food is shared. You're even given a roasted guinea pig leg and a sweet corn cake. Children reenact Skrapi's legendary flour theft. Someone starts calling him the White Spirit, despite the fact that he's not white. That night, as you settle into your mat under the stars, Skrapi curls beside you with a smugness that could rival a sun god. You whisper, "And are you even real?" He flicks an ear and steals your last bite of cake. You take that as a maybe. Morning dawns with the smell of pine resin and fresh anxiety. The curaka bursts into your sleeping hut, waving a strip of dyed cloth as if it were both invitation and threat. "Temple service," he declares. "Polishing day." "That's all," he says before stomping off, presumably to ruin someone else's breakfast. You sit up, rubbing sleep crust from your eyes. Temple service means gold, lots of it, and a level of supervision that makes yesterday's feather fiasco look lax. Skrapi wakes too, bleating through a mouthful of someone's leftover quinoa. He shakes himself, sending grains everywhere, then prances outside like he's late for a throne audition. You follow a group of villagers along a paved path toward a low ridge. At the summit, sunlight strikes an elaborate stone complex. Stepped, walls tiled in shimmering sheets of metal, gleaming even under thin cloud cover. This is the Coricancha, or at least the local version. Every important settlement keeps a small sun temple modelled on the famous one in Cusco. The walls are faced with hammered gold plates, secured by pegs so precise you can't slip a blade between them. You swallow hard. Gold like this could buy an entire village in any other empire, except here it isn't currency, it's cosmic wallpaper. Widely known fact, the Incas called gold the sweat of the sun, purely decorative. Divine and definitely not yours. An officiant marches you to a storage chamber. Inside, trays stacked with discs, cups, and llama effigies hammered from precious metal. Your job? Polish them until they shine like dawn itself. They hand you a bundle of alpaca wool cloths soaked in fine ash and cactus juice, an ancient buffing compound. One swipe across a disc and your reflection blazes back at you, warped and ghostly. Skrapi trots in behind you. The priest squints. Why is there a small white deer in here? He's a goat, you sigh. A sacred goat? Closer to profane? The priest frowns, but perhaps still rattled by yesterday's envoy incident, allows Skrapi to remain, provided he doesn't chew on Inti's sweat. You salute ironically. The priest misses it. You begin buffing. The first piece is a golden sunburst with radiating spikes, each no bigger than your finger. As you polish, you notice faint scratch marks on the back, probably from being hastily removed during one of the empire's traveling ceremonies. The Incas routinely dismantled temple plates for royal processions, then reattached them with perfect alignment. Historians still debate whether specialized crews performed this work, or if local villagers rotated in. Either way, the engineering skill borders on obsessive. Halfway through your third disc, a supervising monk approaches, inspecting your progress. He taps a fingernail against the surface, ping, and nods. Good. Now faster. He hands you a larger piece, a mask with almond eyes and a stylized frown. For the festival of Intihuatana, he says. Polish until the gods can see themselves. No. Pressure then, as you work, two other novices swap whispered gossip about a recent rumor, a secret chamber beneath Cusco said to hold life-sized gold sculptures of cornstalks, llamas, and even guinea pigs. One claims to have seen sketches captured by Spanish raiders. Already, the empire's fringes feel tremors of distant conquistadors. The other snorts, saying historians will one day argue whether those tales were exaggerations to impress invaders or genuine inventories of temple wealth. You tune them out, focusing on your reflection, coalescing in the gold mask. With each stroke, your face sharpens, but so do the cracks in your lips, the smudges of soot embedded in your skin, the purple dye staining your nails. Gold reveals truth, whether you want it or not. Skrapi decides truth is boring. He wanders to a corner basket filled with dried akira roots and promptly starts chewing. A novice notices, panics, and trips over a stack of gilded llama figurines. They clatter like a burst of cymbals. Everyone freezes. The supervising monk spins around, eyes blazing. You brace for divine lightning, or at least disciplinary lashes. Instead, the monk sighs. Remove the goat. Skrapi trots out happily, dragging a root like a victory banner. When the immediate crisis passes, you're assigned to the outer courtyard to help reattach cleaned plates. You climb a wooden scaffold gripping sun-hot rungs and align each sheet, flush with its neighbors. The fit is so perfect you can't fathom how they achieved it without iron tools. You press pegs into pre-drilled holes, pop, and the plate locks in place, reflecting blinding light that makes you squint tears. Somewhere behind you, Novices chant a hymn to Inti, their voices rising and falling in slow waves. As noon approaches, the officiant hands you a small cup of green chili chicha, a curiosity reserved for laborers working near sacred objects. It's sour, spicy, and oddly refreshing. Apparently adding chili stimulates circulation at high altitude. You sip, cough once, then feel heat spread from your chest to your fingertips. You almost believe you could polish gold forever. A bell clangs, lunch? You descend, legs wobbling, and gather with workers beneath a reed awning. Bowls of ochre stew pass around, tangy, filling, flecked with mountain herbs. You're halfway through when you realize Skrapi is missing. Again, you find him in the shadow of the main altar, staring at his reflection in a plate you haven't hung yet. He nudges it, sniffs, then looks at you almost quizzically, as if wondering why humans fuss over shiny rocks when perfectly good roots exist. You and me both, you mutter, hauling the plate away. Afternoon drags on. By the time you bolt the final sheet, your arms buzz like plucked strings. The officiant inspects the wall, smiles faintly, and mutters a blessing. Gold for the gods, he says, sweat for the people. You catch your reflection one last time. Behind you, Skrapi ambles across the courtyard, wearing someone's discarded ceremonial necklace like a lopsided halo. For a heartbeat, the mask's polished surface shows a boy and a goat, though one looks suspiciously taller, shadowy, maybe not a goat at all. You blink, the image is gone. Evening descends in a rush of pink and orange. The gold plates catch the dying sun, igniting the temple in molten fire. Villagers gasp at the sight. Travelers prostrate themselves. You just sag against a wall, exhausted, fingers aching, eyes dazzled. The officiant thanks you with a nod, presses half a coca leaf into your palm. Payment enough. You chew it slowly, numbness spreading along your gums, easing ache. As you shuffle back to the village, Skrapi trots behind, necklace jangling. A passerby bows and whispers, "Beautiful little alpaca." You can't even muster a correction. You reach your sleeping hut, collapse onto your reed mat, and tug the blanket up to your chin. Skrapi curls at your feet, head resting on your ankles, necklace still shining in the candlelight. "Gold for the gods," you whisper, "crumbs for the rest of us." He snorts, probably agreeing or just hungry. Either way, the gods got their shine, the empire keeps its treasure, and you... Well, you kept Skrapi out of the polishing solution. Mostly? You drift off, eyelids heavy, wondering why sacred metal reveals everything but the mystery of a goat no one else can properly name. You wake before the sun, this time without being poked or kicked or startled. You're simply awake. The kind of awake where your joints ache preemptively and your dreams have already receded like mist behind stone walls. Skrapi is sleeping, nose first in a basket of dry beans. Occasionally, his leg twitches like he's dreaming of stomping on something important. You decide to let him rest, for now. Today, you're headed to one of the Inca Empire's most underappreciated marvels, a tumbo, a roadside lodge for travelers, messengers, state workers, basically the ancient equivalent of a highway rest stop, minus the vending machines and existential crises. Your job is to clean, repair, and stock it for an incoming noble caravan, which sounds peaceful, until you remember that a tambo is expected to be a fully functioning pit stop and warehouse, food pantry, animal stable, and sleeping barracks all in one. Also, the roof leaks. You set off with a crew of 5 others, including a man who speaks only in proverbs and a woman who claims she once personally combed the Sapa Inca's beard. Skrapi follows uninvited. Naturally, the tambo is about 3 miles uphill, perched on a ridge with panoramic views and absolutely no shelter from wind. The structure itself is impressive. Long stone walls, rounded corners to resist earthquakes, and a cleverly ventilated storage room known as a kolka. You stare at the door, already slightly ajar, and steel yourself. Inside is chaos. Sacks of dried fish are overturned. A pile of firewood has collapsed like a defeated Jenga tower. Someone's left a cracked bowl of fermented pepper paste right in the doorway, which Skrapi finds before you do and promptly tips over. Great. Your first job, inventory. You're handed a quipu, not a big one, thank the gods, and told to match knots with items in the storehouse. You locate the sacks of maize easily, though they smell slightly more fermented than they should. The dried charqui, jerky, is accounted for, though some has teeth marks in it. Possibly rodent, possibly Skrapi. You don't ask. Outside the proverb, man is trying to fix a crack in the wall with wet clay. Even the stone forgets its place, he says solemnly, smearing mud over the fracture. You nod as if this makes perfect sense. Around mid-morning, a group of passing runners stops by, panting and dusty, requesting water and a few mouthfuls of toasted maize. You scramble to serve them, refilling their gourd bottles from the tambo's spring-fed trough. One of them sees Skrapi lounging near the hearth. "Cute llama," he says. "Still a goat," you mumble. The runner grins. That's what they all say. While the others prep bedrolls and patch roofing with woven mats, you're sent to the sumak wasi, a small room set aside for elite travelers. Your task is to sweep it, lay out clean blankets, and burn some herbs to make it smell nice. You light a small bowl of smoldering eucalyptus and wild mint, which gives off a sharp, clean aroma. You breathe deeply. Peaceful. Then Skrapi walks in, sneezes directly into the bowl, and walks out again like it was a public service. You follow him back, into the main plaza, where workers are now heating large flat stones for the evening meal. These Pachamanca-style ovens involve placing meat and tubers between layers of hot stones, covering it all with earth and letting it steam. It's genius, it's ancient, it smells incredible. You're tasked with peeling tubers. You start with enthusiasm. 20 minutes later, you've lost feeling in your fingers, and half your peelings have vanished. Skrapi is sitting nearby with suspiciously bulging cheeks. "Are you helping?" you ask him, "or just freeloading your way through the empire?" He blinks. Someone asks if your weird white sheep can carry firewood. You don't even argue. By late afternoon, the tambo is glowing with activity. Blankets are stacked. Dried foods are neatly arranged. The fire pit roars. Music begins, just 2 flutes and a hollow drum, but the rhythm is light and easy. Villagers begin to relax. Even the air feels warmer. You take a moment to sit on a low wall and look out at the view, ridgelines crisscrossing like the seams of the world, the road winding away like a stitched thread across the slope. You think of the thousands of messengers, merchants, soldiers, and farmers who've rested here, eaten here, even just tied their sandals for a minute before marching on. And you, tired, dusty, utterly unqualified, you're now part of that. Skrapi hops onto the wall beside you, tail flicking against your elbow. He's wearing a wreath of herbs someone apparently made for him. You didn't even see it happen. A woman approaches. She stares at him for a moment. Is that a deer? You exhales slowly. I'm starting to think he's a very tiny god. She nods solemnly and hands him a roasted yam. He takes it without breaking eye contact. Dinner is served just as the sun kisses the horizon. You eat with your hands, roasted ochre, salted fish, crunchy maize. The fire crackles, laughter spreads, and someone starts telling a story about a ghost that lives in the cliffs above the Tambo. You don't believe it, but then again, you travel with a goat no one agrees is a goat, so who are you to judge? You fall asleep that night on a wool blanket near the fire, stars flickering above you like holes poked in the firmament. Skrapi curls at your back, warm and weighty and slightly smelling of herbs. The Tambo is quiet. The Empire breathes around you, and as you drift off, you wonder, not for the first time, if Skrapi will still be there in the morning or if he'll just vanish, like gods tend to do. You wake to the sound of silence, which is alarming. In the Inca Empire, silence rarely means peace. It usually means something's gone wrong, someone's gone missing, or Skrapi is up to something elaborate. You sit up quickly. The fire is out, the Tambo workers are gone, and the first glow of dawn paints the stones in pale blue. Skrapi is not beside you. Panic. You stand and do a quick sweep of the courtyard. No goat, no Skrapi, no goat-shaped indents in the grain bin, no soft snorting, no chewed sandal straps. For a moment, you wonder if he finally walked off the edge of existence, like a mischievous little god returning to whatever dimension he came from. Then you hear something. It's faint, coming from behind. The Tambo. You creep around the corner. And there he is. Skrapi. Standing in the cold light of morning. Wearing someone's discarded ceremonial sash, surrounded by a half-circle of women offering him fruit. One of them looks up at you and says reverently, "Your divine sheep is blessing us." You open your mouth, close it, then say, "Please don't feed him more fermented mango." Too late. The women disperse as the sun clears the mountains. It's time to return to the village, but as you prepare to head back down the winding path, a messenger arrives, dressed in the classic runner's tunic with coloured checks and a quipu slung across his chest. He's out of breath but grinning. "There's been a change," he says. "You're needed in the Hall of Justice." You blink. "Why? What did I do?" He shrugs. "Could be anything. That's not comforting." You and Skrapi descend to the village, arriving just as things begin to stir. You're escorted to a long, open-air chamber with a carved bench and two stern-faced officials seated behind a low, stone table. This is the Inca court system, a local judicial office where disputes are handled by elders using laws passed down orally. There are no lawyers, no appeals, just community judgment and the occasional llama witness. "Sit," one elder says. You sit. Skrapi sits beside you. A scribe reads from a bark scroll. You are accused of improperly categorizing a sack of beans, mislabeling it as tribute, and he squints. Feeding ceremonial oke to a possibly divine livestock unit. The elder looks at Skrapi. "That one?" You sigh. "Yes." "He's a goat, allegedly." There's a long silence, then the elder says, "Is it true?" You fumble. I didn't mean to mislabel the beans, and the oke sort of rolled off the altar. He just found it." The elder taps his chin. "Intent matters less than effect." There's a pause, then laughter from the second judge. "It's fine. The festival went well." The envoy smiled. "The goat didn't destroy anything important." "Technically," you say, they dismiss you with a wave. You're halfway out the door when the elder calls, "Wait." You freeze. "New task," he says. We need someone to help remark the sequis. You blink. The what? He raises a brow. Sacred lines, you'll see. You're handed a small pouch of coca leaves, a measuring cord, a handful of wooden markers, and a stone tool shaped like a tiny shovel. Your job is to follow an astronomer priest, a yachak, as he realigns ceremonial lines radiating from the village temple. The sekes were invisible lines used to organize ritual geography, linking sacred sites, springs, rocks, trees, and temples in a vast web of spiritual cartography. Think GPS, but powered by gods instead of satellites. The yachak greets you with a nod and sets off toward the hills. He walks with purpose, muttering numbers, checking shadows, and occasionally stopping to draw tiny circles in the dirt. You follow, occasionally placing a wooden marker where he points. Skrapi trots along behind, chewing grass, occasionally knocking over your carefully placed markers. You try to follow the yachak's explanations, which include phrases like solstitial axis, lunar resonance, and when the condor shadow touches the Earth's eye. You nod a lot. You understand none of it. At one point, he turns to you suddenly and says, "Do you feel the energy line?" You pause. "I feel hungry." He shrugs. Same thing sometimes. By midday, you've climbed 2 ridges, crossed a stone bridge, and placed 12 ceremonial markers in places that seem arbitrary, but apparently align with major star patterns. One of the stones bears a carved face, half-worn, eyes wide and unsettling. The yachak whispers a prayer to it. You just nod respectfully and try not to trip over a root. Skrapi hops up on the stone and promptly relieves himself. The priest winces. The spirits have a sense of humor. For a warning, you stop for lunch beneath a twisted tree that's apparently a huaca, a sacred being, not just a tree. You chew on roasted maize, share a few bites with Skrapi, as usual, and ask the yachak how people remember all these lines. They don't, he says. That's why we walk them. By evening, the light has turned golden again, casting long shadows that stretch the markers into strange geometries. The final seke runs straight from a carved rock to a temple doorway. You place the last marker, then stand with the priest, watching as the last sunbeam lines up with perfect precision. He exhales.
That's it. The world is calibrated again. You don't fully understand what just happened, but it feels right. As you walk home, Skrapi trots ahead, then stops suddenly, staring into the dusk. You stop beside him. A shooting star streaks
Overhead, quick and silent. You look down at him. Don't say it's a sign. He sneezes, then walks away. Good. You weren't ready to believe him anyway. You're back in the village, feet sore, calves barking, and sunburn blooming across the back of your neck like a punishment from Inti himself. You'd love to collapse into your reed mat, maybe eat something that hasn't been blessed by 3 gods and trampled by Skrapi, but the Kuraka has other plans. You've been selected, he says, eyes gleaming. For what? You ask, wary. The Kameyok needs help with redistribution duties. You stare blankly. Tax delivery, he clarifies. Ah, in the Inca Empire there is no currency. Instead, tribute, mita labor, and material goods is gathered, stored, and redistributed. The Kameyok are the Empire's living spreadsheets, the administrators who track what's coming in and where it needs to go. And now, apparently, you're their intern. You're led to a low, wide building on the plaza's edge. Inside, stacked from floor to ceiling, are woven bags of grain, textiles, pottery, dried meats, herbs, feathers, and, oddly, a bundle of ceremonial sandals. The Kamayok, a stern woman with the sharp features of someone who never misplaces anything, points at a pile of woven tags.
These go there, those go to Huanta, this one. She points at a hefty basket of chicha. Needs to be carried, by you. You nod, then regret it. You lift the basket. It sloshes. Skrapi immediately tries to climb on top of it. No,
You mutter. He does it anyway. You walk to the redistribution circle, basically a giant sorting ring marked out with stones and paint, where other villagers haul goods from various households. Each delivery is measured, recorded on a quipu, then reassigned based on regional need. You overhear someone muttering about a wool shortage in a southern province. Someone else complains that last season's OCA delivery included half-rotten tubers. The Kamayok hears them both and writes something down without looking up. Your task is to sort and tag. You're handed a reed stylus and a bark strip. Tag reads 20 units of dried maize, region 4, priority medium. You attach it carefully, then accidentally drop it. Skrapi steps on it. You sigh and start again. Nearby, a group of children is tying red yarn around bundles of chili peppers. One of them leans over and whispers, "Is your goat magical?" You hesitate. "Why?" He blinked at me, and I forgot my name for a minute. Fair enough. Mid-morning passes in a blur of counting, lifting, sorting, and sweating. You learn that a unit of tribute doesn't always mean the same thing. In one village, a unit of fish equals 5 bundles. In another, it means enough to stink up the plaza. You start labeling things with symbols instead of words. The Kamayok nods approvingly. After lunch, a particularly spicy stew you suspect, Skrapi seasoned himself. The mood in the plaza shifts. A distant horn sounds, a long, low blast that sends villagers scrambling. A state inspector is arriving. You panic. So does everyone else. The redistribution circle must be perfect. Items aligned, markers clearly placed, nothing chewed, spilled, or suspiciously absent. You race to restack a pile of textiles. Skrapi lies on top of them. You try to move him. He responds by going completely boneless. Eventually the inspector arrives. He wears a black tunic, gold cuff, and a face so neutral it might as well be carved from stone. He walks the plaza in complete silence, trailing 2 assistants and holding a measuring cord. He stops at the OCA bundles. He measures them. He nods. He moves on. He arrives at your chicha basket. He leans down. He sniffs, then he glances at Skrapi, still draped over the basket like a drunken prince. "Llama?" he asks. You force a smile. "Goat," he considers this. "Useful?" You hesitate. Emotionally, he gives you the smallest of nods. "Allowable," you
nearly collapse with relief. After the inspection, the Kamayok calls you aside. "Well done," she says. "One mistake." You brace yourself. You stacked the fish next to the ceremonial candles.
You blink. "Is that bad?" She shrugs. "Only if you like them." "Fair." She hands you a small pouch of toasted corn and a folded strip of fabric. "Your pay," she says. You open the pouch. Corn, salted, crispy. You want to cry. The fabric is a basic woven band, no pattern, no tassels, but it's yours. And in the Inca Empire, clothing is identity. You tie it around your wrist. Skrapi tries to eat it. You slap his nose gently. Not everything is yours. He gives you a look that says otherwise. That night, the sky is clear and endless. The redistribution is complete. The inspector is gone. You lie on your mat wristband, still snug, belly full, shoulders sore. Skrapi curls beside you, snoring softly, his breath warm against your knee. You whisper to him, "You really made it through the inspection." He doesn't move. You add, "They think you're useful." Still nothing. You lie there, staring at the stars, wondering if someday someone will ask, "What was it like to be part of this?" And whether you'll tell them about the numbers, the sweat, the endless hauling, or just about a goat who wasn't a goat, a friend who didn't talk, and how somehow that was enough. Today you're hoping for a quiet one, maybe some light sweeping, a ceremonial nap. You've earned it. Your muscles feel like they've been woven into someone's textile. But as you're sipping warm maize water beside the grain bins, a boy runs up, panting, and delivers your favorite words. You've been chosen. You don't even ask for what anymore. You just sigh and stand. The assignment? Escort a visiting noble's retinue around the village, of course. The noble and
Apple.
regional representative of the Sapa Inca has arrived with a cluster of officials, guards, and a very uncomfortable-looking parrot perched on his shoulder. They're here to inspect public works, observe ceremonies, and generally remind everyone that the Empire is always watching. You're to serve as one of several local assistants, fetching things, answering questions, and most importantly, not embarrassing the village. You're handed a ceremonial tunic. It itches. Skrapi is already prancing through the plaza like he
Owns it. One of the noble's guards squints at him. What kind of hound is that? You inhale slowly. He's a goat. The guard raises an eyebrow. Looks like a very old child. You don't know what that means. You don't ask. The tour
begins. You trail behind the noble as he visits the weaving house where local women demonstrate advanced backstrap loom techniques. The noble nods politely. Skrapi walks directly through the room, tangling a warp thread around his horn and dragging it 3 feet before anyone notices. You stop, unravel him, apologize, and promise you'll tie him to a rock. No one believes. You will. Next stop, the agricultural terraces. The noble admires the slope-staggered fields and listens as the local engineer explains how the layers, stone, gravel, sand, soil, create temperature-stabilized microclimates. He seems impressed. Then Skrapi eats a potato straight from the demonstration basket. The engineer coughs politely. He's symbolic, you mutter. The noble frowns. Of hunger. Of abundance, you try. He hums, not convinced. The tour continues through a stone-cut waterway, a newly expanded public granary, and a ceremonial shrine ringed with offerings of coloured corn. At each stop, Skrapi manages to insert himself, stepping in front of a priest mid-chant, stealing a stick of sugarcane, knocking over a pot that might have been 200 years old. You are quietly dying inside. At the public kitchen, the noble is served, roasted duck with chili glaze and quinoa stew flecked with crushed peanuts. You're told to serve him personally. Your hands shake slightly as you offer the bowl. The noble sniffs it. "What's that smell?" he asks. You freeze, then you realize Skrapi is standing directly behind you, chewing something aromatic, sacred.
incense, you blurt. He nods. Acceptable. By late afternoon, the noble requests a visit to the astronomical observatory, a stone platform with aligned sight lines for solstices, equinoxes, and major celestial events.
You climb the hill with the entourage, wind biting at your tunic. The sky is clear. A priest explains how the sun passes through a narrow stone cleft during the solstice, marking the change of seasons. The noble nods, then looks down at Skrapi, who is sitting in the exact center of the solstice shadow. Does it always sit there? You hesitate. He respects alignment. The priest mutters. Perhaps he's an inti animal. The noble turns to you. What's his name?
Freeze again. You've never told anyone.
It's always just been you and him. Skrapi, you say. The noble tries to repeat it. Squappy? Close enough, he chuckles. You know, he adds, in the highlands, they tell stories of goats that speak only to gods. Glance at Skrapi, who sneezes violently and eats a sacred flower. Yeah, you say, that tracks. Back at the plaza, the noble makes a short speech praising the village. He declares the roads well kept, the food memorable, the textiles exceptional, and the ceremonial goat haunting. You're not sure that's a compliment. The tour concludes. The noble's party departs with flutes playing and baskets of gifts in tow. You're left standing in the dust, sweat-soaked, sunburned, and emotionally fried. The curaka pats your shoulder. You didn't disgrace us. Well done. You nod, dazed. That's the bar, he grins. In this empire, that's
the ceiling.
That night, you and Skrapi sit outside the grain hut, eating toasted maize and watching the stars blink into existence. A child walks by and says, I heard the goat is magic. You don't argue. You watch as Skrapi chews slowly, blinking at the sky like he knows something you don't. He probably does. This morning, you wake up, not to the sound of conch trumpets or ceremonial yelling, but to a quiet drizzle tapping on the thatched roof. It's rare, but when it rains in this part of the Andes, the whole village moves slower, softer, like the sky has politely asked everyone to whisper. You decide to take this as a blessing. Wrong again. The curaka informs you over breakfast, half a dried pepper and a cold corn cake, that today is the Elu's textile audit. That's right. Every family must present their clothing rations, personal garments, and woven offerings for inspection and classification. It's a whole thing. Why? Because in the Inca Empire, textiles are not just fashion. They're identity, inventory, and status signal all rolled into one itchy, hand-woven bundle. The state controls the production of a huasca, everyday cloth, and kumbi, luxury cloth, and these fabrics are distributed based on rank, role, and regional quotas, which means, of course, you're headed to the inspection plaza with your goat. As you arrive, villagers are lined up in neat rows, each family presenting folded stacks of tunics, belts, headdresses, and the occasional awkward hat. You try to smooth the wrinkles out of your own modest tunic. Skrapi, who is not technically part of the inventory, immediately sits on your best woven sash. You tug it free. He sits on it again. Repeat. The inspectors arrive wearing pristine kumbi tunics adorned with checkerboard patterns and gold thread tassels. Their hair is braided, their eyes sharp, and their tolerance low. You're already sweating, they begin, moving down the rows, checking the texture and pattern of each piece, comparing it against expected quotas. 3 tunics per male, 1 belt per child, 2 spare mantles per household. The numbers are unyielding. You present your bundle. The inspector eyes you, then the tunic, then your goat. Whose livestock? You consider lying. He's mine, you admit. The inspector frowns. He's wearing a wool headband. You glance down. Skrapi is indeed wearing one of your spares like a crown. That's ceremonial grade, the inspector notes. Not permitted for livestock. He's difficult to categorize. The inspector scribbles something on a bark ledger. Noted. Ambiguous goat. Possible textile misuse. Great. You're assigned to help catalogue the village's stockpile of emergency cloth. Inside the main kolka, woven bolts are stacked so high you wonder how they don't collapse. You're given a reed tally stick and a short list. Count, sort by pattern type, record damage. Seems simple, but it turns out there are at least 37 distinct weaving patterns recognized by state administrators. You identify maybe 4, you point to 1. Stripes? That's the Chumpi motif, the archivist says, exasperated. Signifies river authority. Point to another. Checkerboard? Tokapu, she snaps. Used only by the military caste. Right, you murmur, squinting at the knots in your tally stick. Meanwhile, Skrapi is slowly vanishing into a pile of mantles. Occasionally, the pile moves or a snort emerges. You leave him there. It's safer for everyone. Midday passes, and you're called outside again. This time, the textile inspector has a surprise for everyone. Standardized tunic distribution. Each villager is given a fresh Awaska tunic marked with their province's emblem, a sort of woven barcode for your identity. You're handed yours. It's beige, it's itchy. It smells faintly of llama. You put it on anyway. Skrapi is handed nothing, but promptly steals a child's spare headband and resumes wearing it like ceremonial regalia. The inspector glares. You'll be responsible for any theft, she says. You nod solemnly. He's more of a borrower. A group of Highland weavers arrives next, offering a brief demonstration of natural dye techniques. You watch as they boil moss, insects, and flower petals into vibrant colors. The cochineal beetle makes red so bright it looks like fire. Indigo root turns wool a midnight blue. One young woman dips a strand of yarn, pulls it out, perfect emerald. Green, Skrapi promptly tries to eat it. Please, you beg. For once, don't consume the Empire's decorative supply chain. He licks the bowl. You apologize. Again. By late afternoon, the audit concludes. You help carry spare tunics back to the storehouse and hang your new state-issued one to air out. The day has left you tired, mentally tangled, and a bit worried. Somewhere during the chaos, your old tunic vanished, probably now part of someone else's tribute pile or serving as goat bedding. You sit near the edge of the plaza, picking stray wool threads off your sleeves. Skrapi joins you, flopping down dramatically and chewing on the tassel of a nearby sash, like it offended him. A boy walks past and asks, "Why does your goat wear human things?" You shrug. "Why do humans wear itchy tunics?" the boy thinks.
So other humans know who we are? You nod. Maybe it's the same for him. The boy nods, solemn, then adds, or maybe he's just cold.
Also valid. As the sky darkens and the clouds part for a moment, the last light of day reflects off the woven flags above the plaza, each one fluttering with its own silent language of color and thread. You look at Skrapi, headband still slightly askew, eyes half closed. He looks like he belongs, or maybe like he's just tolerating all of this until someone hands him another boiled yam. Either way, it feels like home. Your day starts in total darkness. No sunrise, no ceremonial drums, no goat-related disasters, just the low whisper of wind outside and the faint click of wooden sandals on stone. Someone nudges you gently. You're on guard duty today. You blink. What are we guarding? The past, the villager says, cryptically. Turns out you're being sent to the local archive cave, a small, carved-out space just beyond the edge of the village used to store sacred objects, old quipus, relics from past rulers, and the occasional fossilized potato. You're not guarding it from thieves. No one steals from the state archive. You're guarding it from weather. Apparently, last night's rain has made the hillside above it unstable, and if a mudslide rolls through, centuries of records and ceremonial items could be swept away. So now, your job is to sit in front of a cave for 10 hours with a wicker fan, a clay patching kit, and one goat who is already inside the cave, chewing on something that is definitely too sacred to snack on. You wave your hand, spit that out. Skrapi stares back at you with the serenity of someone who has never followed a rule in his life. You set up camp just outside the entrance, a flat stone to sit on, your tool pouch by your side, a cup of herbal tea from the Curaka's wife, and a very detailed list of things you're not supposed to touch. Skrapi naturally knocks the list over with his tail. Hours pass slowly. You patch a crack near the base of the entryway, sweep some runoff water down the slope, and adjust a drainage rock that's been nudged out of place, probably by Skrapi's hooves. The sky stays dry, thankfully, but the air remains heavy, like the earth is holding its breath. A group of elders arrives around midday, bearing incense, coca leaves, and bundles wrapped in embroidered cloth. They enter the archive cave with reverence, whispering blessings and placing the bundles gently in the deepest recesses. Step aside respectfully. One of them pauses beside you. "Do you know what's in there?" she asks. You shake your head. "Memories. People forget them, so we wrap them in thread." She leaves before you can ask more. Later, a priest arrives to record a new quipu, a rare event. He settles into a crouch, stringing dyed cords between his fingers, knotting each with practiced rhythm. You watch in fascination. Every twist, loop, and spacing has meaning. Dates, tribute amounts, events, perhaps even names. Can it store feelings, you ask? He doesn't look up. Only if someone remembers how to read them. Skrapi sneezes, startling the priest, who drops a half-knotted cord. "Go," the priest mutters, frowning. "Yes," you say quickly. "I thought it was a cat," he replies. You don't respond. At this point, maybe he is. Afternoon stretches long. A light breeze picks up. You patrol the slope again, shooing away a curious condor and reinforcing a weak spot in the drainage ditch. A small landslip rolls through, dusting your feet with mud. You spend 20 minutes redirecting water channels with a flat rock and a prayer. You sit back down, exhausted. Skrapi hops onto the stone next to you. He doesn't lie down. He just sits, watching the mountains in silence, ears twitching slightly with the wind. He looks almost regal, or bored. You offer him a bite of your boiled corn. He declines. You take that as a sign of cosmic imbalance. As sunset nears, the sky turns that particular shade of Andean gold, the one that makes even llama droppings look sacred. Shadows stretch, the wind stills, no more elders come. The cave remains undisturbed. You think about the people who came before you, those whose memories are tucked into bundles inside the archive, whose stories were knotted into quipus, now faded and fragile. Historians will someday argue about how much of it was accurate, how much was ritual, and how much was lost to time and goats. You already know the answer. It's all real. It all mattered. And somehow, so do you. You close the cave gate, tying the ceremonial knot around the stone latch, just as instructed. The wind picks up slightly, brushing your skin like breath. Skrapi follows you down the path, silent except for the soft pat-pat of his hooves. At the base of the hill, you look back. The cave is still. The mountain watches. The memories are safe. You and Skrapi walk the last mile home in silence, your shadow and his stretching long across the path. You're back in your sleeping mat now, the fire low and warm, flickering softly against the woven walls. The air is cool, and the silence feels full, not empty, like the mountain is tucking you in. You shift beneath your blanket, letting your weight sink fully into the ground beneath you, into the rhythms of stone and soil and stories that came long before you. Skrapi curls up beside you, breath slow and steady, tail twitching with some dream-only goats or possibly celestial beings understand. Tonight there is no labor. No feathers to sort, no fires to feed, no knots to count. Just rest. Just quiet. Just the soft sound of wind moving through distant terraces. You feel the ache in your muscles fading, dissolving into the blanket like dust settling after a storm. The stars outside are blinking into being, gentle and slow, and the moon casts a silver path across the village rooftops. You breathe in, deep and calm. You breathe out, soft and slow. Tomorrow may bring new tasks, new questions, maybe even a few more chosen moments. But for now, you're here. Safe. Still, a small goat-shaped weight pressing into your side. You close your eyes. The stories rest with you. The mountain watches, and the world for a while hums its lullaby, just for you. Sweet dreams